This entire team has been lifted tonight by Odell Beckham. This is sick. Put this to music.
All right, well, let's get into this. So, welcome everyone back to another episode. This is Jason, manager of J-Dogs Jackrabbits in the Rad League. We have Jason on today because he made an interesting trade this offseason with Jake, who you will hear from a little bit after this, where Jason decided to trade out of the first round. So, in return, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jason, but I believe you got picks in the second round, third round, fourth, and sixth round. Is that correct, or just fourth round?
2, 3, and 6.
2, 3, and 6 from Jake. Okay, so why don't you run me through kind of your thought process of not wanting to draft in the first round? The average listener, they would be thinking that this is a poor move.
Yeah, and I would understand where they're coming from, I suppose. So just for context, I had the 8th overall pick in the 10-team league.
Yeah, that's a good thing to mention.
For the second year in a row. And this is the second year in a row that I've traded that first round 8th overall pick to the person who is drafting first overall. Last year it was Rocco, as you know, and that was kind of in the moment draft day trade discussed on the car ride over.
You're
this one
down on this recipe, then.
Well, it's funny. We'll get into that. So, the return on the deal this year with Jake was better than the return I received last year. I got the last pick in the second round, the first pick in the third round, and the last pick in the sixth round. And last year, I got the last pick in the second, fourth, and sixth. So that 3.1 versus 4.10, the huge upgrade. Now, reason being, there's a couple of ways I could look at it, but I had a flawed draft last year. That 2.10, I drafted Mark Ingram with that pick, and we all know how that worked out in Baltimore. But despite that, I found reasonably good success with those extra picks in those, the first 6, 7, 8 rounds. Just
and you hold, I think it's 9 picks in the first 6 rounds. So
that's correct.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's gonna be a lot of guys on your team when we're getting around to some of us picking with our flex. I was saying, is part of your thinking behind this is because you're looking to acquire a lot of assets and a lot of potential tradable assets, maybe go after kind of a stud wide receiver or tight end like that, but 2 to 3 weeks into the year? Or are you just want to hit home runs with your picks?
Well, I think it's very unreasonable to expect that in fantasy football you're going to hit a home run on all your picks. Just that's kind of the nature of the beast. But as far as the idea for building depth is, again, last year I had tremendous success with, or what I consider to be tremendous success with this trade. And I did have a little more depth. I found that I felt like I had reliable options on the bench all year last year. And it's not about the bench players, make no mistake. Injuries happen. This is football. But I would say that it has crossed my mind, the idea of, hey, the unlimited depth or the endless depth could contribute towards a bigger move last year. Actually, one of the players I selected at the end of the 6th round with that trade I made was David Montgomery, who I flipped for Austin Eckler straight up while Eckler was injured. And while Montgomery had a hot finish to the end of the year, it wasn't perfect last year, but I feel like I feel like
do that trade again.
I would do it again. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing as well is, when you're right, when you make mistakes the way I did last year in the draft. So again, Mark Ingram at 2.10. The next running back I selected was Ronald Jones in the 4th round, and I got a lot of flack for that too. Mm-hmm. But despite those errors in judgment, I was 1 week away from the championship. Like it,
Right.
I hit with all other aspects of the draft, and I feel like I could touch up the concept were I to be put in the position again. And sure enough, I was offered a deal that gave me a chance to do that. So I definitely think that it doesn't hurt to have that depth. Not one bit.
Who sought out this deal? You or Jake?
What's that?
Who sought out the deal? Who came after who for the?
See, I was never looking to trade draft picks at all.
Jake was the buyer. Jake was the buyer for sure. So your first pick is at the 203. Obviously, you're keeping Kamara, Metcalf, running back, wide receiver. Are you looking at any position there? We've seen a lot of running backs get hurt in the last couple of weeks. They might be flying off the board like crazy now in the first round. Are you targeting somewhere specific at that 203 spot?
Yeah, they might be flying off the board. So another thing as well is having Kamara and Metcalf gives you more flexibility in being able to make a trade like this. But I would say I'm still reviewing my options. There's obviously still a lot of good players on the board at 203. Last year I took Amari Cooper at that spot, and before Dak got injured, it was money. I was in love with that pick. You just don't really know how the cards are going to fall. Everyone's so focused on the first round. And in the first round, there's usually a teardrop, and I don't think there's a lot of consideration about how deep that second tier can be sometimes. And I feel like having the 13th overall pick is, it's not so bad, especially when the first one was only going to be 5 picks earlier. I think there's a lot of potential to work with.
Yeah, that's a good point. Final question here before you go. Are you planning on going 0 RB at the beginning and drafting Ronald Jones and Chase Edmonds again and riding them with Kamara this year?
To be decided, I guess. There were a couple of mistakes in the draft that I made last year, and unfortunately carried over to the regular season. I think I've learned a couple lessons, so I'm gonna have to see where I'm at. But at the end of the day, the names on the board and the production and the success, with some guys it speaks for themselves. So I can go in with a strategy and I can have A, B, or C in mind, but ultimately, if there's a guy that's there that you can't pass up, you can only really make that decision in the moment. So I feel like with that tier of players, it's going to be it's going to be heat of the moment thing.
All right. Well, I'm convinced this is a good trade for you now. So I'll see what Jake says when he comes on a little later. But yeah, I don't hate your strategy here. You got a lot of picks the first couple rounds, excluding the first round, but there's a lot of good players. And for our league, you got to remember there's already 20 players off the board at the 101, right? So if you equate that to the first 2 rounds, like in theory, you're only giving up a third round. It's not completely like that, but you got a lot of upgrades in those middle rounds for that third. So thanks for coming on, and I hope to get you back soon.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
All right, cool. 3, 2, 1. Now, you guys have already heard from Jason. You've already heard the cat side of the story, why they're acquiring all the depth. Now we have on Jake the Jelly, manager of the Jabronis, aka the Jab Jabronis. Jake's got two picks in the top 8, 2 picks in the first round, paid up a lot to get them. He has picks first overall, 8th overall, like we just said. Then he misses the second round and the third round, picks again the 4th and the 5th. So Jake, why don't you kind of walk us through your thought process here of why you're targeting this first round so heavy?
First off, I just want to say thanks for having me, Splint. It's great to be on the show. So there was a lot I took into account when making those picks. Obviously, every team has their perspective, their own philosophy on how they envision the draft going. From my standpoint, there's a tier break between the first and where I was picking at the turn. So I had picks pretty late. So Jason has my picks back end of the second and then first.
Yeah.
So that when you look at the players that are going to be available around there, even with the recent injury of J.K. Dobbins, there's not a lot there that I was really looking at. When you look at the board that's likely to fall around that period, you got your remaining running backs, a few high upside wide receivers. And I really like the first round. There's a lot of key guys and a lot of key guys there. And I just really want to go in heavy to start the year. I have some 2 concrete keepers, and I want to get 4 big monsters to start off the draft and just let the back end play out.
So for those of you who don't know, Jake's keepers are CMC and AJ Brown. You've made it. You haven't officially announced your first overall pick at the 101, but it seems to be going Nick Chubb. We're just gonna sidestep that, take that as we will. Are you targeting anyone at the 108? Are you looking to bring back one of the guys you didn't keep in Justin Jefferson and George Kittle? Are you trying to snipe a third running back to load up there? What are you thinking?
So that's part of the reason in my intention of getting that 108 position is I have a lot of good options to wait on. I have a few people in mind, maybe in even a specific position, but there's 4 concrete guys that you really can't go wrong with. I'd be happy to move forward with any of those. Usually around that 2 to 3 round, you have your eye on 1 or 2 guys, and then you end up getting cucked at some point here and there, and then you end up getting maybe the second best option at that first round 108. I have a guy in mind, maybe 2, and I'd be happy even with my 3rd or 4th choice. So we'll see how it happens.
How are your expectations right now for J-Dog? He's got no picks in the first and he's loading up in these later rounds. Well, how do you think that's going to shake out for him?
I mean, Jason's in a different perspective than different position than a lot of teams, rather, where he's got some 2 very solid keepers. So he has some flexibility too. Maybe he has a different philosophy than I do on how those later rounds play out. But he's got DK, he's got Kamara. I mean, those are 2 guys you can really rely on.
Yeah.
In terms of that, going back to that round where I just traded out of, I don't see a lot there. I mean, every day we see injuries. Sure. Luckily, we're out of the preseason and hopefully things kind of go at a standstill. But I mean, I think he's going to get in a tricky position. A lot of people in the first and early second are going to get their running backs, and he's going to have to find that RB2 that really builds out his depth and a player that you really need. I'm confident in Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb. I mean, I'm okay with that. If I were in his position, I'd be shitting my pants right now. But I mean, you heard what he said before I was on, and I don't know. I'd be interested to see how it plays out. But to my point earlier, he is in a better spot than most teams. So
right.
It's just a matter of how he plays it. There's a lot of pressure on him. I'll tell you that. There's a lot of pressure.
There is.
And I would not want to be in his shoes. I would much rather have my 4 monsters at the top of the draft.
All right. So we've got our draft coming up. Then before you know it, week 1's going to be here. It's going to be Sunday, week 1. Very important to start off 1-0. Kind of sets the market right away. I see you've had some Sports Center going on in the background. It was hockey earlier. It was drawing my eye. Anyways, week 1 coming up. Everyone wants to start off 1-0 because that can pretty much determine if you're a buyer or a seller right off the bat. There will be moves made after the first week. With that being said, obviously you want that 1-0 start. Who are you hoping you get when the schedule is released next week? Who do you want to play week 1?
I consider myself a top-tier team. heading into the draft, looking to start the season. I see myself hopefully as a top-tier team, and I want to play the top-tier team. I want to play Mike to start the season.
Okay.
I want to make a statement, beat the former champion, and really tell the league that the Jab community is out to play.
All right. Well, the Jab community is here. That's for sure. I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. I wish you luck at your 108 selection. I hope you get one of your 4 guys you're looking at, and I'm curious to see if Jason can manage to have a good draft, or if he's just going to be looking like he's got flexes all over his team.
Yeah, there's gonna be some sweat dropping down his face when it comes his turn to pick. I'll tell you that for free. Some leftover shawarma sauce on his face, some sweat dripping down. I'll just say for you, I don't know what direction you're going in. And a lot of my pick at 108's largely dependent on you. So
yeah,
I'm looking at you, and I'm shaking my boots as well to see what you're gonna pick. So it should be fun.
I could either wipe out the running back landscape, or I could wipe out the tight end landscape. One of those will be determined with my pick. That will determine who's getting pushed up the board in round 2 and at the end of the first, what position's going up. So I don't even know where I'm going yet. We'll have to see. But thank you again for coming on. We'll have to have you again on during the season.
Absolutely. Looking forward to coming back.
Sounds good.